What if I told you that the quietest, most dead time on the ice is actually when the biggest pike are telling you exactly where they are? But you've been taught to ignore the signs. You've been told they're lethargic, that they sink to the bottom and barely move for months. Today, we're going to challenge that. We're not talking about another lure or a new spot on the map. We are exposing the one fundamental secret of pike behavior in the dead of winter, a secret that explains why 90% of anglers go home empty-handed. By the end of this video, you will understand why that big, lazy-looking pike isn't lazy at all. It's hunting in a way you never expected, and it's been right under your feet the whole time. So let me ask you, do you still believe that pike just sit on the bottom and wait for spring? Let me know in the comments, because we're about to blow that theory right out of the water. For years, the story has been the same. When the ice gets thick and the snow piles up, we enter the dead of winter. The old-timers tell you the fish slow way down. Their metabolism crashes, they get sluggish, and they just don't need to eat as much. So, what do? We follow that advice. We downsize our baits, we slow our presentations to a crawl, and we drill a million holes over classic structures, like points and drop-offs, hoping to drop a shiner right on a pike's nose. We do it because that's what we've always done. It's the accepted wisdom. But this entire approach is built on a massive misunderstanding. We've been focusing on the fish's hunger, when we should have been focusing on its need to breathe. The secret isn't in their stomach, it's in their gills. And that changes the entire game. Let's start by dismantling the biggest myth, the lazy winter pike. We hear the term slow metabolism, and we picture a fish that's basically hibernating. But that's not accurate. Think of a pike not as lazy, but as the ultimate energy conservationist. It's a finely tuned predator that has evolved to survive harsh conditions with maximum efficiency. Every single movement is calculated. It's not going to waste energy chasing a small meal across a flat if it doesn't have to. Imagine a professional sniper. They don't run around. They find the perfect position, control their breathing, and wait for the perfect moment to act with explosive force. That is the mindset of a big winter pike. It's not sleeping on the job. It's waiting, conserving, and positioning itself for the highest probability of success with the lowest energy cost. This shift in thinking, from lazy to efficient, is the first step to finding them. So if it's not just about being lazy, what is the single biggest factor driving their behavior? It's not structure, and it's not even food. It's oxygen. Under a sealed-off sheet of ice, oxygen is a finite resource. Photosynthesis from weeds slows or stops, and decomposition starts to chew up the available dissolved oxygen, especially in the deep. The entire lake becomes a puzzle of breathable zones and dead zones. For a large fish like a pike, which has high oxygen demands, finding these life-sustaining pockets is priority number one. It's more important than finding a perfect ambush point or a school of perch. A pike can't ambush anything if it can't breathe. This is the key that unlocks everything else. We've been looking at lake maps showing depth contours when we should have been trying to visualize an invisible map of oxygen levels. Now let's connect this to the bait fish. We've always been told, find the bait, find the predators. And that's true, but it's an incomplete picture. Why are the bait fish where they are? In the dead of winter, schools of perch, shiners, or cisco are also on a desperate search for oxygen. They will abandon classic structures and suspend in seemingly random open water if that's where the best oxygen is. They are just as trapped by this invisible map as the pike are. So the pike isn't just randomly following a food source, it is shadowing a food source that is, in turn, following the only thing that matters for survival. It's a chain reaction. The oxygen dictates where the baitfish go, and the baitfish dictate where the efficient pike sets up its ambush. This is a crucial distinction. You're not just looking for bait, you're looking for the specific conditions that concentrate that bait. This leads to the million-dollar question. Where are these secret oxygen hotspots? They are almost never the most obvious spots on the lake. Forget the classic deep holes where decomposition has sucked all the life from the water. Instead, think subtler. Number 1. Healthy green weed beds. Even under the ice and snow, some coontail or cabbage weeds can produce small amounts of oxygen on sunny days, and they hold it. They are like little oxygen oases. Number 2. Underwater springs or inflows. Even a tiny trickle of fresh, oxygenated water entering the lake can create a pocket that attracts life for hundreds of yards around it. These are often marked on old hydrographic maps, or known by locals who have been on the lake for decades. It's the kind of spot you'd drive right past without a second thought. Another overlooked oxygen source is the ice itself. Specifically, areas with recurring cracks and refreezes. Think about it. A pressure crack forms, exposes water to the air, and then freezes over again, trapping a slightly more oxygenated layer of water just below the new ice. It's a microenvironment. This might only attract small minnows, but a hungry perch will find them, and a big pike will find that perch. These aren't huge lake-defining structures. They are subtle, temporary zones of life. You have to start thinking less like a construction worker looking for foundations and drop-offs, and more like a detective looking for faint clues. You might see a dark line on the ice where a crack refroze, and that could be the X that marks the spot for the entire day. It's about reading the ice, not just the map. So, we've found a potential oxygen-rich area, maybe a patch of green weeds in 12 feet of water. How is the pike actually behaving here? This is where we get the hunting mode wrong. It is not actively patrolling, it is doing the opposite. It becomes a living statue. A big pike will often suspend, perfectly motionless, just off the edge of these weeds. It will use its big fins to hold its position with near zero effort. It's not on the bottom, and it's not near the surface. It's hanging in that sweet spot of water temperature and oxygen, waiting. It's relying entirely on its camouflage and its patience. The fish is in a state of neutral buoyancy, burning almost no calories. It's waiting for that school of perch to make a mistake and swim just a little too close. This living statue behavior is why our typical presentations fail. Imagine this perfectly still 20-pound pike, and here we come, drilling a hole and sending down a flashy lure that we're aggressively ripping and jigging. To that fish, which is in maximum conservation mode, our lure looks unnatural, frantic, and suspicious. It's like someone sprinting through a quiet library. It's out of place. The pike might look at it out of curiosity, but it's unlikely to commit because it signals danger or too much effort. We are trying to trigger a reaction bite from a fish that is not in a reacting mood. We are speaking the wrong language. We need to match its energy level, and its energy level is as close to zero as a living creature can get. The key is not to excite the pike, but to convince it. Now let's talk about our electronics, our beloved flashers and sonars. They can be our best friends, but in this scenario, they can lie to us. Your flasher is designed to pick up movement and density. A pike that is perfectly suspended and motionless might register as a very faint, thin line, or it might blend in with the weed cover so well that you don't even mark it. You might see a big, thick red mark sitting right on the bottom and think, there he is. You spend an hour trying to coax that fish. But that bottom-hugging mark is likely a truly dormant negative mood pike. The one you can actually catch, the living statue, is suspended 5 feet above it, barely making a whisper on your screen. We get so fixated on those big, beautiful bottom marks that we completely miss the subtle, catchable fish hanging in the water column. This leads to one of the most common frustrations in ice fishing. A fisherman says, "I marked fish all day, but I couldn't get a single one to bite." Chances are they were marking the wrong fish. They were marking the deeply inactive ones, the ones hunkered down in low-oxygen water on the bottom. The active feeding fish were in those oxygen-rich zones, suspended and so still that they were practically invisible. It's a classic case of looking for your keys where the light is best, not where you actually dropped them. The secret is to start trusting your instincts and your knowledge of oxygen over what your flasher is screaming at you. If you're in a good area, a green weed bed for instance, but not marking much, that might actually be a good sign. It might mean the predators are in stealth mode. So how do we adjust our tactics to target these invisible, efficient hunters? The answer is a technique that many modern anglers find boring: dead sticking. But it needs to be done with purpose. It's not just about letting a minnow sit there. You need a large, appealing bait, a big golden shiner, a sucker, or even a dead Cisco. The goal is to present a meal that is so easy, so impossible to resist, that the pike breaks its statue-like trance for it. The bait should be hooked lightly so it looks natural and vulnerable. It represents the ultimate low-energy, high-reward opportunity. It's the equivalent of having a pizza delivered directly to your couch when you're too tired to cook. The pike doesn't have to chase it. It just has to slowly move in and inhale it. The placement of this dead stick is absolutely critical. You can't just drop it to the bottom. Based on what we know, where should it be? Suspended. You need to use your electronics to find the depth of the weeds or the bait fish, and then set your presentation just above that. If the weeds are at 12 feet, set your bait at 10 feet. If you see suspended perch at 15 feet, set your bait at 13 feet. You want your offering to be hovering right in that oxygen-rich travel corridor. You want it to be the first thing a pike sees as it watches the edge of the cover. This requires patience. You're not trying to attract a fish from 50 yards away. You're waiting to intercept a fish that is already there, already hunting in its slow, methodical way. Let's bring this into a real-life scenario. You get to the lake. Instead of running to the deepest hole, you pull out your phone and look at a satellite map. You find a large, dark area that indicates a shallow weed flat that probably stays green longer. You drill a test hole and pull up a piece of fresh, green coontail. That's checkpoint number 1. Now, instead of drilling a grid across the whole flat, you focus on the edges, where the weeds meet the sand or mud. This is the natural highway for both baitfish and predators. You set up your tip-ups or dead stick rods right on that edge, with your bait suspended a few feet off the bottom. You are now fishing with a strategy based on oxygen and efficiency, not just depth. Consider the type of bait again. In summer, a lively, frantic bait is great. In the dead of winter, that can be a turnoff. A large dead bait on a quick-strike rig can be far more effective. Why? It has zero unnatural movement. It just hangs there, smelling delicious, looking like the easiest meal in the entire lake. A pike sees it, and its brain makes a simple calculation: calories gained versus calories spent. A dead bait represents infinite calories gained for almost 0 calories spent. It's an offer it can't refuse. Many old-timers knew this instinctively. They would use big, dead baits and have incredible success, while everyone else was jigging tiny spoons and getting nothing. They understood the pike's mindset without necessarily knowing the science behind it. This oxygen-first approach also explains why certain days are better than others. A stable, high-pressure system with bright sun can spur a little bit of photosynthesis, creating slightly better oxygen conditions and turning the fish on. Conversely, a long stretch of cloudy weather with heavy snow cover can black out the lake, stop all photosynthesis, and accelerate oxygen depletion, leading to a very tough bite. It's not just the barometric pressure affecting the fish's mood directly. It's the pressure system affecting the lake's environment, which in turn affects the fish's primary survival instinct. When you start thinking this way, you can look at a weather forecast and make a much more educated guess about where and how you should be fishing. Let's talk about timing. The major and minor feeding times from the solunar calendar can still play a role, but they are secondary to the oxygen principle. However, there are often 2 windows of opportunity. First light can be good, as bait fish that were scattered in the dark begin to regroup in the oxygenated zones. But the more overlooked window is midday. On a sunny day, this is when any potential for photosynthesis is at its peak. It might only be a 1% increase in dissolved oxygen, but to the fish, it can feel like a breath of fresh air, and it's enough to trigger a short feeding window. Many anglers are packing up to go get lunch, right when the best bite of the day might be about to happen, especially over those green weed beds. Another piece of the puzzle is sound. A frozen lake is incredibly quiet. Fish, especially large old pike, are highly sensitive to vibration and noise. When we run around, drill hole after hole with a gas auger, and scrape our shovels on the ice, we are sending massive shock waves down into their world. For a fish that is in a state of high alert and low energy, this is a major disturbance. It can cause them to lock down completely. The strategy of running and gunning can be your own worst enemy. The successful angler in this scenario is often the one who gets to a promising spot, drills a few holes as quietly as possible, gets set up, and then stays put. Patience and stealth are more valuable than a fast auger. Let's reconsider the idea of community holes. These are the spots where you always see a village of ice shacks. Why are they popular? Because at some point, maybe during early or late ice, they produced fish. But in the dead of winter, these high-traffic areas can be the worst places to be. The constant noise and pressure can push sensitive, bigger fish out. Furthermore, a concentration of fishermen often corresponds to a classic obvious structure, which, as we've discussed, might be depleted of oxygen by now. The real trophy is often found away from the crowds, in a boring-looking bay that has a patch of healthy weeds that nobody else has bothered to find. You have to be willing to ignore the crowd and trust the principles of oxygen and efficiency. This concept also changes how we interpret a slow day. If you've been fishing a prime oxygen-rich location for hours with no flags, it's easy to think there are no fish there. But that's not necessarily true. You could have a 40-inch pike suspended 10 feet away from your bait, watching it the entire time. It's just not ready to commit. It's waiting for the perfect moment. The difference between a bite and no bite could be as simple as a single perch swimming by and making your bait look more attractive by comparison. The lesson here is that in the dead of winter, confidence in your spot is key. If you know you are in the right type of area, you have to be willing to wait it out. The fish are there. They are just operating on a much, much slower timeline than we are. To put it all together, the secret is a complete reversal of the typical approach. Instead of focusing on covering water, you focus on dissecting it. You identify the small, subtle zones that offer the highest probability of good oxygen. You approach these zones with stealth. You present a large, easy meal, and you place that meal not on the bottom where the inactive fish are, but suspended in the water column where the efficient hunters are waiting. You use your electronics to confirm the presence of cover or bait, but you don't live and die by marking big red blobs. You trust the process. It's a slower, more thoughtful, and more strategic way to fish. It requires more homework before you even get to the lake, but the payoff can be the biggest fish of the season. Finally, this changes our perception of the fish itself. The giant pike isn't just a dumb, aggressive eating machine. In the winter, it's a master survivor. It understands its environment on a level we can barely comprehend. It plays the long game. By understanding its absolute reliance on these small pockets of life-giving oxygen, we stop fighting against its nature and start working with it. We're no longer just dangling a bait and hoping for the best. We are setting a deliberate, calculated trap based on the fish's most fundamental needs. That's the moment fishing transforms from a game of luck into a game of skill and deep understanding. And that's the secret that's been hiding under the ice all along. So, let's bring it all home. The great secret of the dead of winter isn't a magic lure or a secret spot that nobody knows about. The secret is that we've been looking at the problem completely backward. We assumed the pike were lazy and dormant, so we fished for them that way. But the truth is, they are hyper-efficient predators, and their entire world, their every decision, is dictated by a desperate search for one thing: oxygen. The truly game-changing moment is when you stop looking for a hungry pike and you start looking for an opportunistic pike. A fish positioned perfectly in a pocket of good air, waiting for the easiest possible meal to drift by. This completely changes your strategy. You stop drilling random holes on old familiar structures, and you start hunting for subtle, oxygen-rich zones like greenweeds or underwater springs. You stop aggressively jigging, and you start presenting a large, vulnerable meal with extreme patience. This is the shift that separates the anglers who get lucky once in a while from the ones who consistently find big fish in the toughest conditions. Thank you so much for watching. If this video blew your mind, or maybe if you think I'm completely full of it, I want to hear from you in the comments. I read all of them. And before you go, hit that subscribe button for more content that breaks the old rules. Now I want to ask you, what's the one old rule of fishing you've discovered just isn't true? Let's talk about it below. Tight lines.